As more Democrats drop out of the presidential race and Donald Trump goes into full campaign mode with rallies and attacks, I wanted to give everyone a bit of a reality check. We still have 439 days to go until the election. And even though we're 50 months out, the president certainly not holding back. We discussed before the break how he's calling Jewish people disloyal if they have the temerity to vote Democrat. He's also said many times the economy, it will crater if he doesn't win again. Well, my next guest says he very well could win re-election. Matt Taibbi's piece in Rolling Stone is called Trump 2020, Be Very Afraid. America, the first country to ever elect a mad king, and the way things are going, we may be dumb enough to do it twice. Matt, as always, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Richard.
Well, let's do this in stages, in terms of the here and now first. I said 15 months out. It seems that by the week, if not even the news cycle, whatever lines they were, he's leapfrogging them, not tiptoeing over. Where do you see this thing going? I only see the rhetoric getting ramped up, pouring accelerant on whatever fires there are out there, whether it be racial or otherwise. Do you see any reason he tamps this thing down between now and next November?
No, I mean, his pattern is that whenever you think that the media situation is actually tilting a little bit in his favor and that he might do well to pause and back off a little bit, he actually redoubles and doubles down on the crazy rhetoric. And somehow these incidents seem not to be fatal to him. Hanging around with reporters in the campaign trail last year, we used to talk about a phenomenon on the campaign we called the seal of death. When candidates stumbled, the media used to pile on them and they would sort of disappear from the race. Whenever we thought that would happen with Trump, he would somehow rise in the polls at the end of it. So he has no incentive to stop and dial back his rhetoric. This behavior seems to work for him in the end. It's not entirely clear how, but it does.
But here's what I don't get, Matt. And like everybody else, I was wrong about what was going to happen in November of 16. Dead wrong. But I can't find one metric, even with a convoluted electoral map. His base is his base, and they'll stay with him, like he said, if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. I get all that. But in every other demographic, what will only be a more motivated electorate to go out and vote next fall, he doesn't have a pathway. Is it that we're so petrified about how wrong we got it in 16 that we won't even acknowledge the math that says he gets the floor wiped with him with any of the Democrats? And I agree, they're not all world beaters here, certainly for messaging for the middle of this country. That said, though, are we just gun-shy because we're gun-shy, or is there real math that suggests that he's a real likely candidate to win re-election? I just don't see the pathway to him getting there.
Well, I made the mistake last time around, the same mistake that a lot of pundits made. Early on, I was actually one of the first people in the group of campaign reporters who did believe that he was going to win the nomination. But after he sealed that up, like a lot of people, I let pollsters talk me into the idea that there was no pathway to him. And the usual argument had to do with favorability ratings, because he could never get over 50% with the entire population. But the thing that we didn't count on was that Trump ended up doing very well with people who disapproved of both choices at the polls. So it's not so much that he has an insurmountable unpopularity. It's that there's an enormous amount of ambivalence and disgust with politics in general, and he seems to do well in an environment where there's a lack of enthusiasm for both candidates. So you have to look at who the opponent is going to be and how enthusiastic the electorate is going to be about that person, as much as you want to look at Trump's actual base of support, which I have to say is stronger than it was at this point of the race last time, when he was still struggling to gain control of the Republican electorate.
I want to read a part of your story, this section. Quote, the most common remark you hear from Trump voters is that he's relatable and he's not phony. Blue state audiences tempted to howl at this should try to understand this phenomenon because it speaks to a legitimate problem that Democrats have. The average American likes meat, sports, money, porn, cars, cartoons, shopping, less populist socialism, privilege checking, and the world ending in 10 years. Ironically, perhaps because of Trump, Democratic Party rhetoric in 2020 is relentlessly negative about the American experience. Every speech, a horror story about synagogue massacres or people dying without insulin or atrocities at the border. To that end, Matt, I get it, but isn't he the chief of doom and gloom? I mean, I want to play this clip for everybody. I mean, I know you know it, but just to remind everybody, what he says will happen to this country. God forbid he's not elected.
Let me tell you, if for some reason I wouldn't have won the election, these markets would have crashed. And that'll happen even more so in 2020. You have no choice but to vote for me because your 401ks, down the tubes, everything's going to be down the tubes. So whether you love me or hate me, you got to vote for me.
They see him as Captain Positive? Really?
Well, again, I know the content of that delivery, but listen to the way he's delivering it. Trump is a skilled television performer, and everybody who's been on television knows that people often don't even listen to what you're saying. What they're looking for are nonverbal cues. Whether or not you're exuding positive or negative energy, whether you have a sense of humor, whether people feel that you have a sunny disposition. Trump, his crowds, people laugh at them. They have a good time. They identify him with reality shows that they enjoyed watching, and they do not identify Democratic candidates with people who they can connect with in Middle America. I know that sounds really depressing and negative, but Trump to them is just a fun character who they watched on wrestling and WWE, and yes, he's absolutely threatening and negative in the actual things that he says, but people are looking at something else beside that.
Stop. You're killing me, Matt. I know you're right, but you're killing me. And you know when I knew you were right? You probably were even there. I was sitting at this set when this is in the primary, and he descends on the Iowa State Fair in that Trump chopper with the gold-plated name plastered across the side, with a tie that goes down to his knee and his blue suit. And I said, they're going to eat him alive. This phony New Yorker coming in, all but making fun of the country bumpkins, to use Trump's analogy, right? And they gave the guy a standing O like he was a conquering hero. How possibly he's viewed as believable and the honest, relatable guy when he has nothing in common, and he is phobic to anything resembling the area code of the truth. I still don't get how people don't see through that, or do you think they just don't care?
Well, there are two things there, I would say. If you're talking about, for instance, Iowa, you have to think about what Iowans, how they relate to presidential candidates. They're used to every 4 years, a string of politicians coming through their state, telling them how much they love to bale hay and how they're a friend of the common man and how they're salt of the earth and they grew up on farms or in small towns. And it gets tiring after a while because those presentations are, scripted and phony and poll tested, and people can see right through them. Trump blows through Iowa. He says openly that he's not into ethanol and he's not a country bumpkin, and he's from New York. He doesn't even when he after the primaries, he often doesn't even hold the speeches in those states. He elects to do it from New York because he'd rather be there, and he admits that. And people on some level, they actually do relate to the fact that he's not telling them what they want to hear. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. So yes, people see he's a complete phony, but in terms of whether or not he has something in common with these voters, he does. He has exactly the same media habits that they do. He reads the same stuff that they read on the internet. He watches the same trashy TV programs. And his tastes are the same in many things. People see Trump as the kind of person that they would be if they had $1 billion or however much money he actually has. So I know the caricature of him is somebody who everybody sees as a phony, but his actual character, I think, is very revealed to voters in a way that is unusual.
Now, I know that line, he's predictably unpredictable, but I see no way, Matt, that if he loses, and even if it's not razor close, but it's within, I don't know, 50, 60 electoral votes. I see no way that this man will go quietly into the good night. And I don't care who you vote for. I don't care someone's personal politics. That concerns me. Do you share that concern? And can you give an idea to folks just how ugly this thing potentially could get?
Well, remember, Trump was already talking before the last election about how people should reject the results if they came out the wrong way. So that was already a theme that he was preparing in the event that he lost. The only thing that I would think that would provide some reassurance on that front is that the story that a lot of us got is that Trump really didn't even want the presidency to begin with, and that his family, and in particular his wife, was deeply disappointed when he won. It was abundantly clear at the beginning of the race anyway that he certainly announced his run with no intention of ever being a serious contender, and that it only over time morphed into something that became real. I have no idea how much he actually enjoys being president compared to his lifestyle before. Certainly his ego doesn't seem like it would take the blow very well, and he would probably reject the results on that score. But it's an open question to me how much he actually enjoys being in power right now, because it's his lifestyle beforehand was not bad. He traveled the world, played golf, and hung around with celebrities, which is certainly more fun than being president, I would think.
Well, he can still hang out with Scott Baio. Let's not cheat him of that. But to that point, Matt, I think there's one big variable people aren't really talking about. And if at all what I'm hearing from folks close to it, the Southern District and the AG in New York are sitting on possible mother loads here that Barr just can't make wash away. And a president is one thing, as we've learned here. There's certain things that are afforded to him or her that they can't be prosecuted. But once he's a private citizen again, all bets are off. He could have some real exposure issues if he doesn't win in November 2020. That might be motivation enough for him to do anything and everything to make sure he tries to stay in office.
Well, sure, and that's the common theme of third world countries. It's not the experience of the United States yet, but certainly that's the reason why authoritarian rulers never want to leave office, is because they have to worry about the consequences after they leave the presidency or the prime ministership or whatever it happens to be. Trump, he has already essentially walked away from the campaign finance investigation that was connected to his lawyer. They've already announced that there aren't going to be further charges there in that New York-based investigation. But you're right, there may in fact be something else. And certainly he has every incentive on the legal score to stay in office because he's protected from prosecution as long as he does is effective.
To anybody who wants to be both depressed, but also to get a sense here, especially if you're watching us from those cities in the Eastern Seaboard, you got to check out the piece. Really good read. Trump 2020, Be Very Afraid in Rolling Stone. Matt Taibbi, as always, great job. I really appreciate the time.
Thanks very much, Richard. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone, when we come back, a DC insider who's going to take us behind the scenes of the White House and also discuss President Trump's latest moves, bizarre statements, as well as a healthy amount of controversies.